Where does this leave McChrystal, Eikenberry, the whole diplomatic side? Who's in charge of the strategy in Afghanistan? And that's the question we are left with.
Indeed, and by how the U.S. government operates, it's not the military commanders that are in charge of U.S. policies. It's they are a component of it, but in countries like Afghanistan, the U.S. ambassador, although in wartime, the military component certainly has a large element to play in it. But right now, the diplomatic role seems to be very low. You report that the British ambassador another British ambassador is on the verge of resignation over it, and this will probably be the third British ambassador to Afghanistan that has had severe criticisms of U.S. policies and hence NATO policies in Afghanistan. And McChrystal is the head of not only U.S. forces in Afghanistan, but also of the International Security Assistance Force and the NATO forces that are there.
It's not only British officials and military personnel that have criticism of the United States. In the Rolling Stone piece, they quote a senior U.S. advisor saying the war is going worse than we realize, quote, if Americans pulled back and started paying attention to this war, it would become even less popular. That was the quote. Reporter going on to say still Pentagon officials are hoping that rather than a withdrawal of troops, the White House will approve a third surge, that it's going worse than they thought.
Yes. Well, when you have the general himself saying that this much-touted offensive in Marjah is now a bleeding ulcer, when you have McChrystal himself saying that the offensive that was to take place in Kandahar needs to be postponed, you can see that the military strategy is definitely being relooked, that things are being postponed because there's not the cooperation on the ground of Afghan forces.
You were in Afghanistan. You were a fierce critic of the war in Afghanistan. A lot of the discussion about this Rolling Stone article about, catching the criticism of calling Holbrooke a wounded animal because he's always afraid of being fired, no telling what he will do, calling National Security Advisor Jones a clown, Biden, bite me, also talked about President Obama as being uncomfortable when he met with top generals and not being prepared when he first actually met with General McChrystal.
Well, that sort of analysis of your commander-in-chief and to have that coming out publicly is, it is ultimately the criticism of a president that while one might hold those views personally, you certainly don't put them out to a reporter. You don't put them out so that the troops in the field will read the uncomfortableness that the senior leadership of the military has with their commander-in-chief. I mean, it's all based on good order and discipline of the military and being subordinate to civilian leadership. And this is really undercutting any faith and confidence that the military should be having in its leadership and how it relates to the commander-in-chief.
Colonel Ann Wright, you're a former diplomat. You were the former deputy head of the Afghanistan mission. You opened the Afghanistan U.S. mission in 2002.
Yes, and at that time, I thought there was a window of opportunity that the United States might be able to help the people of Afghanistan through a short program of help on civic assistance, humanitarian assistance, but knowing full well the history of Afghanistan, that invaders and occupiers, no matter what your national reason for being there, have a short shelf life. And with the Bush decision to divert the resources into Iraq, that window of opportunity closed very quickly. And now we are 9 years into being in Afghanistan. And we see that as much as most Afghans don't like the Taliban, they also don't like warlords that are part of the Karzai government, the corruptness of the Karzai government. And while they really don't want to be allied with the Taliban, at least there's some order and structure and you know what's going on with them. That's the real battle that General McChrystal and U.S. foreign policies in Afghanistan are facing right now, that the Afghan people really have no faith in what the United States is trying to do 9 years later.
I wanted to ask you about another issue, aside from just coming off the flotilla that tried to get into Gaza, and we spoke to you about that when you were in Turkey, when you'd been deported by the Israeli military. I also wanted to ask you about the oil spill, the BP oil spill. A federal judge has struck down the Obama administration's 6-month ban on deepwater oil drilling in the Gulf of Mexico. The White House imposed the ban last month as the BP oil spill spiraled into what many have called the worst environmental disaster in U.S. history. On Tuesday, U.S. District Judge Martin Feldman called the suspension, quote, heavy-handed and overbearing. A Reagan appointee, Feldman has extensive stock holdings in energy companies, including Transocean, which owned the Deepwater Horizon oil rig where the explosion took place, and Halliburton, which also performed work at the site. Feldman also owns stock in 2 of BP's largest shareholders, BlackRock and J.P. Morgan Chase. White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs said the Obama administration will appeal the ruling.
We will immediately appeal to the Fifth Circuit. The President strongly believes, as the Department of Interior and the Department of Justice argued yesterday, that continuing to drill at these depths without knowing what happened does not make any sense, and puts the safety of those involved, potentially puts safety of those on the rigs and safety of the environment in the Gulf at a danger that the President does not believe we can afford right now.
In a statement, Interior Secretary Ken Salazar said he'll issue a new order reimposing the drilling ban. Salazar says he'll detail the reasons for the ban to address Judge Feldman's concerns. But you were in a congressional hearing room when Diane Wilson, a Code Pink activist, got arrested, her hands covered in oil. Why were you there?
Yes, well, I was there. I had been at the Congress all the night before. Diane and I stayed overnight in front of the Houses of Congress to make sure that some citizens got some seats in that hearing room. Only 10 citizens got in that room, one of whom was Diane Wilson, an environmentalist, a shrimper. She's a boat captain. She's been fighting for cleanup of oil spills and chemical spills in her bay in Texas for years and years and years. And so I was there with Medea Benjamin of Code Pink and Diane Wilson, who's a co-founder of Code Pink, and also Unreasonable Women. And that's where we have to be. We have to be very unreasonable. This whole thing of, I mean, a short-term ban on drilling is just a tiny drop in the water. We need to be out there saying a full-time ban on this deep water drilling. Also, Diane Wilson is in Taiwan right now. She's going to a stockholders meeting of Formosa Chemicals, which polluted her bay in Texas. And stand by for news for that one. I'll tell you what, Diane Wilson will be doing something in Taiwan that will be equally as dramatic as she did in the hearings in Washington, D.C.
Well, Ann Wright, I want to thank you for being with us. Retired Army colonel and former U.S. diplomat, served as the deputy chief of mission at the U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan. She helped open that mission in 2002, and she's here at the U.S. Social Forum. We're going to talk more about the U.S. Social Forum and hear from people who took to the streets. More than 10,000 people across the country and the world marched through the streets of Detroit yesterday. We'll hear from some of them. Stay with us.
We want the power for the people. That's all we ask in our country, dear. The sick and the hungry are unable. Protect them and those who may live in fear. We as the young wish to say in this song, God bless great America. We give thanks to the old for achieving their goal. It is now up to us, and we know we must build up a trust. And we want the power for the people. That's all we ask in our